She was paid $20 to ruin a blind date, but the millionaire fell in love instead. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The restaurant glittered like a jewel box. Chandeliers sent warm light across polished silverware and velvet seats. A soft piano played, competing with the low hum of expensive conversations. At the center of it all sat Richard Hale, the millionaire every magazine called untouchable. His suit was crisp, his posture commanding, his expression sharp with impatience. Another blind date, another evening arranged by his family. He checked his watch, already annoyed. Meanwhile, just outside those heavy glass doors, Elena clutched the strap of her worn-out purse. Her shift at the diner had ended only 30 minutes ago. The soles of her cheap shoes ached, and her hair was barely pinned back. In her hand, a crumpled $20 bill, pressed there by a stranger with a smirk. Ruin his date, he'd told her. Make it messy enough so she never wants to see him again. $20 was bus fare and bread. $20 meant her little brother wouldn't go to bed hungry. She told herself it was simple. Just cause a scene and leave. She pushed the door open and stepped into a world that did not belong to her. Waiters in white jackets swept by with trays of wine. Her eyes darted to the tall man in the corner booth, already radiating irritation. Richard Hale. One glance, and she knew this wasn't just a rich man. This was someone who was used to control, to obedience, to people never telling him no. She swallowed hard. Then she walked straight toward him. Richard didn't even notice her at first. His eyes were on the entrance, expecting a polished woman in designer silk. Instead, a shadow fell across his table and a glass tipped over. Ice water cascaded down his lap. The entire room froze. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Elena's voice rang out, too loud, too shaky. Her hands trembled as she grabbed at the dripping napkin. Richard looked up slowly, his gray eyes cold as steel. His jaw tightened. "Do you always make an entrance like this?" Elena's heart raced, but she forced a crooked smile. "Guess I just saved you from a boring evening." Murmurs spread across the tables. Some guests laughed under their breath, others whispered in shock. Richard studied her. She wasn't polished, wasn't rehearsed, wasn't anything he expected, but she stood there, unflinching. "Who are you?" His voice was calm, but it cut like glass. She pulled the chair opposite him and sat down as if it belonged to her. "Your date." For a second, not even the piano dared to play. Waiters stood frozen. Richard leaned back, one eyebrow lifting. "Interesting, because I don't recall inviting chaos to dinner." She leaned forward, lowering her voice but keeping her eyes on his. "Chaos is free. The wine, you'll have to pay for." His lips almost twitched, almost. But before he could reply, the real date arrived. A woman draped in diamonds, hair styled perfectly, the kind who belonged to a man like him. Her heels clicked sharply across the marble until she stopped, stunned, at the sight of Elena in her place. "What is this?" she demanded. Richard's gaze lingered on Elena for one long second. Then he turned back to the woman and said evenly, "This is who I'm dining with tonight." The woman's face flushed crimson. She spun on her heel and stormed out. Perfume trailing like smoke, gasps rippled through the restaurant. Elena's heart thudded against her ribs. This was not how she expected the night to go. "You just lost your date," she whispered, almost guilty. Richard leaned in, his eyes locked on hers, steady and unreadable. "Number, I just chose one." Her breath caught. The $20 bill felt like it was burning inside her purse. She had been paid to ruin his night, but nothing in his expression said he felt ruined. Instead, he looked at her as if she were a riddle worth solving. The restaurant noise crept back slowly, but for Elena it all faded. She could only hear the pounding of her own heart as Richard's next words slipped across the table like a command she couldn't ignore. "You're not leaving. You're coming with me." Richard's words still hung in the air, low and sharp. "You're not leaving. You're coming with me." Elena blinked, her heart hammering in her chest. She hadn't expected the plan to last more than 2 minutes. She was supposed to spill water, make a scene, and walk out with her $20. Now the millionaire across from her looked at her as if she were part of something larger, something he had already decided. She swallowed hard. "Excuse me?" Richard leaned closer, eyes steady. "You ruined one evening. Fine. Now you're going to fix the rest of it. Tonight you'll play a role." A waiter appeared nervously with a fresh tablecloth. Richard didn't break eye contact as he spoke. "Cancel the reservation for 2. Make it for 1 couple." The waiter hesitated, glanced at Elena, then scurried off. Elena shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I was just—" "Sit up straight," he interrupted, his voice low but firm. "They're all watching. Smile like you belong." She froze, then forced a small smile. Around them, whispers buzzed like bees. Who was the strange girl in the cheap dress? Why did the Hale heir choose her over a diamond-draped socialite? Richard reached for his glass calmly, as though the world wasn't questioning him. "My family arranged this date, but I don't let anyone arrange my life. You happen to be useful." Her throat went dry. Useful. That was all she was to him. Still, a part of her wanted to laugh. $20 for chaos. And now she was eating steak she could never afford. Dinner passed with a strange rhythm. Richard cut his food with precise movements. Elena tried not to drop her fork. Every time she spoke, his eyes narrowed like he was dissecting her. Every time she stayed silent, he seemed more curious. Finally, she blurted, "Why me?" He leaned back, wine swirling in his glass. "Because you don't flinch. Most people crumble the second I raise my voice. You spill water on me and make a joke." Elena bit her lip. If only he knew the truth that her knees were trembling under the table. By dessert, the tension had shifted. What began as defiance turned into an odd rhythm, a fragile truce. She teased him about his perfectly aligned tie. He smirked when she mispronounced a French word on the menu. For a fleeting second, it felt almost natural. Then his phone buzzed. One glance at the screen and his jaw tightened. They're waiting outside. "Who's waiting?" she asked cautiously. "My family, and half the board of directors. They want to see my date." Elena nearly choked on her water. "I'm not your date." Richard stood, sliding a few bills on the table. His gaze locked on hers, calm but unyielding. "You are now. Let's go." Before she could protest, he offered his arm like a gentleman in an old movie. Stunned, she placed her hand lightly on it, the touch foreign and electric. Together they walked through the dining room, every head turning, every whisper rising louder. Outside, the night was cool, the street glittering with cameras. Photographers, shareholders, even his mother stood waiting under the golden awning of the restaurant. The flashes erupted the moment Richard stepped out, Elena clinging to his side in borrowed courage. "Richard," his mother's sharp voice cut through the noise. "This is your date?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Meet Elena." Elena's cheeks burned. She tried to smile politely, but the weight of so many eyes pressed down on her. She could almost hear the unspoken judgment. "Poor dress, nervous posture, not one of us." Richard bent slightly, whispering for only her to hear. "Don't run. Not now. You started this. Now you finish it." Her pulse raced. This wasn't part of the deal. $20 had turned into a stage, and the spotlight was blinding. But as she straightened her back and forced herself to meet those piercing stares, a spark flickered inside her chest. Maybe she didn't belong here. But maybe she could. And when Richard's hand pressed firmly against the small of her back, guiding her toward the waiting cameras, Elena realized this night was no longer about money. It was about survival. And maybe, just maybe, something more. Flashes exploded like fireworks, and Elena felt her vision blur. The cameras didn't care who she was. They only cared about the story. The powerful Richard Hale, arriving arm in arm with a woman no one recognized. The whispers hit her ears even over the clicking shutters. Who is she? Not his usual type. Looks like a waitress. Richard's jaw was set, his expression cool as stone. To the world, he looked in control. But his hand pressed firmly against her back, almost anchoring her in place. Elena tried to smile, her lips trembling. His mother's eyes swept over her, sharp as glass. "Richard, we need to talk. Privately." He didn't budge. "Anything you want to say, you can say in front of Elena." Elena's stomach twisted. In front of her? She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be counting tip money back at the diner. His mother forced a smile for the cameras, but her words cut beneath it. "You bring this girl to an event of this importance?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "I bring who I want." The crowd erupted in more flashes. Elena felt heat climb up her neck. Her entire life had been about staying in visible cleaning tables, fading into the background, making herself small. And now, she was being photographed beside a man worth billions. The group moved toward the waiting cars. Richard opened the door of a sleek black town car and gestured for her to get in first. She slid across the leather seat, heart still racing, the scent of polished wood and cologne filling her lungs. Richard climbed in beside her, closing the world out with a heavy thud of the door. Silence. Her voice finally cracked. "Why are you doing this?" Richard turned, his profile lit by the city lights flashing through the tinted windows. "Because people think they control me. My mother, my board, the media. Tonight, you gave me something they can't script. Chaos." She shook her head, half laughing, half panicking. "I'm not your chaos. I'm just a girl who took $20. His eyes flicked to hers, calm but unreadable. "And yet you stayed. You could have run after the water spilled, but you didn't." Elena hugged her purse tighter. If he only knew how close she had come to bolting out the door. The car slowed, pulling up to the grand entrance of the Hale Tower. A red carpet was rolled out, leading into a ballroom glittering with gold light. The company gala. Elena's breath caught. She had walked past this building 100 times, looking up at the glowing logo, never imagining she'd step inside. Richard stepped out first. The crowd cheered, cameras flashing again. Then he held out his hand for her. She hesitated, staring at the polished marble steps, the people in gowns and tuxedos. "You don't have to fake it," he said quietly, his hand steady. "Just walk with me." Her pulse pounded in her ears. She placed her hand in his, and the world tilted. Every step beside him felt like trespassing into a life that wasn't hers. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and walls of glass overlooking the city. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne. The air buzzed with money, ambition, and judgment. Richard guided her to a table near the stage. Colleagues, investors, and family members circled, their eyes all darting toward her. Elena tugged at her thrift store dress, wishing it would swallow her whole. A woman in a silver gown approached, her smile razor-sharp. "Richard, you didn't tell us you'd be bringing company." Her gaze lingered on Elena like she was a stain on the carpet. Richard's reply was cool. "Now you know." The woman's smile faltered. She turned her attention to Elena. "And what do you do, dear?" Elena froze. A dozen faces leaned closer, waiting. She wanted to vanish, but then she remembered Richard's words in the car. "You don't flinch." She lifted her chin, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I work at a diner. Nights, weekends, sometimes double shifts." The silence was deafening. Then, a snicker from someone in the crowd. Another whispered, "Unbelievable." Elena's cheeks burned. For a moment, she thought Richard would let it hang there, let her drown in their disdain. But then his voice cut through, steady and powerful. "And she works harder than most people in this room. That's worth more than your last name." The hush was instant. Elena's eyes widened, her throat tightening. For the first time all night, she realized Richard wasn't just using her to rebel. He was protecting her. And in the middle of the glittering ballroom, under 1,000 judging stares, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she didn't feel like an intruder. She felt like she mattered. The hush that followed Richard's words clung to the ballroom like smoke. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Glasses clinked against tables, and the silver-gowned woman's smile froze before she slipped away. Elena kept her eyes on the floor, her pulse still racing. She had expected him to let her drown. Instead, he had pulled her up. Richard leaned closer, his voice low enough only for her to hear. "Keep your head up. They only win if you look ashamed." She inhaled, squared her shoulders, and forced her chin higher. Every pair of eyes in the room still weighed her down, but something inside her steadied. If he could stand there without blinking, maybe she could too. The evening moved forward with toasts and speeches. Richard's name was called again and again, his company praised, his wealth admired. But Elena felt every whisper that curled behind her back like smoke. At one point, a waiter passed with champagne. She reached for a glass, but her hand shook. Richard covered it gently, pushing the glass back. "Not yet. You'll be fine without it." His words weren't warm, but they held a strange kind of care. Across the room, another familiar face appeared: Meredith, Richard's ex-fiancée, tall and radiant in crimson silk. She floated toward them, her smile sweet but her eyes sharp. "Richard," she purred, placing a manicured hand on his sleeve. "I didn't know you'd bring someone." Her gaze swept over Elena like a spotlight. "Charming choice." Elena felt her throat tighten. She tried to look away, but Richard's hand found hers under the table, steady, deliberate. "She's not a choice," Richard said calmly. "She's my date." The air around them stiffened. Meredith's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, turning her full attention on Elena. "And what do you think of all this? The gala, the company, the press? Must be overwhelming for someone like you." Elena's first instinct was to shrink, but then she remembered the snickers, the whispers, the way Richard had defended her. She looked Meredith straight in the eye. "It is overwhelming," she admitted. "But people underestimate waitresses. We see everything. Who tips fairly, who pretends to be kind, who leaves a mess for someone else to clean. Nights like this, they're not so different." The table fell silent. Meredith blinked, clearly not expecting a response that sharp. Richard's lips tugged into the faintest smirk, and he lifted his glass in silent approval. The moment passed, but Elena's heart was pounding. She had spoken without a script, and somehow it had landed. For the first time tonight, she felt like she hadn't just survived, she had held her own. Dinner continued. Courses arriving like clockwork. Elena tasted foods she couldn't even name, laughed awkwardly when she used the wrong fork, and tried not to notice the cameras flashing from the corners of the room. When the orchestra struck up a slow melody, couples began drifting to the dance floor. Elena stiffened. She had never learned ballroom dancing. Richard stood, buttoning his jacket, then extended his hand. "Don't tell me you can't dance," he murmured. She stared at his hand. "I can't." "Good," he replied, steady. "Neither can half the people here. Come anyway." Against every nerve screaming no, she took his hand. The crowd parted slightly as he guided her into the light. His hand rested at her waist, hers on his shoulder. She stumbled at first, nearly stepping on his polished shoes, but his grip steadied her. "Relax," he said softly. "Stop counting. Just follow." Her breath caught. The music wrapped around them. The chandeliers glittered above, and for a strange, dizzying moment, the whispers faded. It was just her and him, but the spell broke with a flash. A photographer caught them mid-step, Richard's hand firm at her back, her face flushed, his eyes softer than anyone had seen in years. The image spread across the ballroom like fire. Phones buzzed, screens lit up. Whispers swelled again, but this time they weren't just mocking. They were curious, shocked. Some even sounded impressed. Elena's pulse hammered. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to matter. Yet here she was in the arms of the man she was paid to humiliate, and the world was watching. She leaned in, whispering through the music. "This is insane." Richard's lips brushed close to her ear as he answered. "Maybe, but it's real." And for the first time that night, Elena couldn't tell if he was still pretending. The music faded into applause as the song ended, and Richard guided Elena back to their table. Her hands were still trembling, though not entirely from fear. The dance had been clumsy, her steps uneven, but somehow he hadn't let her fall. And the way he looked at her steady, almost protective, made her forget, for a fleeting second, the $20 deal that had brought her here. But reality came crashing back when she caught sight of Meredith. Richard's ex-fiancée stood at the edge of the dance floor, lips curled into a knowing smile, phone glowing in her hand. She wasn't just watching, she was recording. Elena's stomach dropped. One wrong word, one careless slip, and the entire facade would shatter. She whispered urgently, "Richard, she's filming us." He didn't flinch. "Good. Let her. Every camera in this room is already on us." The next course was served delicate salmon draped in lemon butter, but Elena could barely swallow. Whispers traveled faster than the waiters. She could hear fragments floating through the air. Waitress, scandal, rebound. Richard raised his glass as though none of it mattered. "You're doing fine." She shot him a look. "Fine? I'm drowning out there." "Oh, you're still standing," he replied. "That's more than most would manage." His calm unsettled her. She wasn't sure if he was comforting her or testing her. The evening wore on, speeches about market growth and expansion plans filling the stage. Elena tuned most of it out, her focus fixed on keeping her shoulders straight and her hands steady. But when Richard was called up to speak, her pulse spiked again. He rose, smooth and confident, his presence commanding the room. Elena watched him climb the stage, her breath caught. He was in his world now, sharp and untouchable, every word carrying the weight of power. "Tonight isn't just about numbers," Richard said, his voice echoing across the hall. "It's about trust. Trust between our company, our investors, and the people who believe in us. And trust is built when we stop pretending and start being real." His eyes flicked toward Elena, just for a moment, enough to make her heart slam against her ribs. The room stirred with curiosity. Everyone had noticed. When he returned to the table, Elena hissed under her breath. "Why did you look at me like that?" "Because you're the only real thing in this room," he answered simply. The words knocked the air from her lungs. She wanted to argue, to remind him this all started as a lie, but her voice caught in her throat. The gala ended with a final toast. Guests rose, clinking glasses, laughter spilling into the night. Richard's hand brushed lightly against Elena's arm. "Come, it's time to leave." Outside, the cool night air hit her skin like relief. Limousines lined the curb, photographers still flashing as couples departed. Richard's driver opened the sleek black car, but before they stepped in, Meredith's voice cut through the night. "Lovely performance," she called, striding closer. The crimson silk of her gown shimmered under the streetlights. "But we all know she doesn't belong here, Richard. Your board won't tolerate this circus." Elena stiffened, but Richard's jaw tightened. "The board doesn't run my life." Meredith's laugh was sharp. "No, but money does. And parading around with a waitress will cost you more than you think." Elena wanted to shrink, to disappear, but something inside her snapped instead. She turned toward Meredith, voice steady though her heart pounded. "Funny, I thought money was supposed to buy class. Maybe you should ask for a refund." "No." Gasps erupted from the crowd of onlookers. Even Richard's stoic mask cracked into the faintest grin. Meredith's face flushed, and for once, she had no reply. Richard opened the car door wider. "Get in," he said to Elena, though his tone was softer now. She slid into the back seat, pulse racing from her own audacity. Richard followed, and the door shut, sealing them off from the chaos outside. For a long moment, the city lights streaked past in silence. Then Elena whispered, "I shouldn't have said that." Richard turned his head, eyes studying her in the dim glow. "Number you should have. They'll think twice before underestimating you again." Her chest tightened. He wasn't laughing at her. He wasn't mocking her. He was serious. The car rolled deeper into the night, carrying them toward a destination Elena couldn't name. But one thing was clear. The girl who had taken $20 to ruin a date was no longer just part of a prank. She was in the middle of a story that could change both their lives. The car hummed quietly as it rolled through the city, lights streaking past the tinted windows. Elena sat pressed against the leather seat, clutching her purse as if it were armor. The adrenaline from her sharp remark to Meredith still pulsed in her veins. She couldn't believe the words had come out of her mouth. A waitress, snapping back at a woman who wore gowns worth more than her yearly rent. Richard broke the silence first. "You surprised me." Elena glanced sideways. "That's not always a good thing." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Tonight, it was." Her cheeks warmed. She looked away, forcing herself to focus on the glowing skyline. She had to remind herself this wasn't real. She had been pulled into his world by accident and $20, nothing more. The car slowed as it entered a private drive. Towering gates opened, revealing the Hale estate. Elena's breath caught. She had seen pictures of it in magazines, but reality dwarfed imagination. Wide marble steps, tall glass windows reflecting the night, and manicured gardens lit by subtle golden lamps. It was less a house and more a kingdom. As the car stopped, she shook her head. "You're not seriously taking me in there." Richard stepped out and offered his hand. "Of course I am. You didn't think the evening ended at the gala, did you? Her pulse thundered. I don't belong here. You didn't belong at the gala either, he said evenly. And yet you stood taller than half of them. Reluctantly, she placed her hand in his, letting him guide her up the steps. The front doors swung open, revealing a hall of polished stone, high ceilings and walls lined with artwork Elena had only seen in textbooks. She tried not to gape, but every inch of the place screamed wealth on a scale she couldn't fathom. A man in a suit, likely a butler, greeted them politely before disappearing down the hall. Richard led her into a smaller lounge, the fireplace glowing softly. He gestured for her to sit. Elena perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse tighter. Why am I here, Richard? I can't keep pretending. Someone is going to find out, and when they do, it won't just be embarrassing. It'll destroy you. He poured himself a glass of scotch, his movements calm. You think I care about embarrassment? He turned, eyes steady. The truth is, I've had more lifeless dinners with women in diamonds than I can count. Tonight was the first time in years I didn't feel bored. Her chest tightened. That doesn't mean I'm supposed to be here. No, he admitted, sitting across from her. It means you're not like them, and that's exactly why you are. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I'm a waitress. I live in a tiny apartment, work double shifts, and I can't even pay all my bills on time. You're a millionaire. We don't exist in the same world. Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze unwavering. Maybe that's what I need. Someone who's not from my world. The words unsettled her. Part of her wanted to believe him, but part of her knew fairy tales didn't pay rent. Before she could answer, the sound of heels echoed down the hall. Richard's mother appeared in the doorway, her expression sharp as ever. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Richard, a word. He stood, calm but firm. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. Her eyes flicked to Elena, full of disdain. This girl is a liability. She will ruin you. The press will devour her. And the board will not tolerate it. Elena shrank back into the couch, the weight of those words sinking deep. Liability. Ruin. She wanted to disappear, but Richard's reply came without hesitation. The board doesn't choose my life. Neither do you. His mother's face darkened. You think they'll let you throw everything away for this? Richard didn't flinch. Maybe I've been throwing everything away by listening to them. The silence that followed was heavy. His mother's eyes narrowed. Then she turned sharply on her heel and left, heels striking the marble floor like gavel blows. Elena sat frozen, unsure whether to speak or run. Finally she whispered, "She's right. I will ruin you." Richard turned back, his expression softer now. "No, Elena, you just might save me." Her throat tightened, and she couldn't find words. She had stepped into this mansion as a girl who took $20 to cause chaos. But now, in the flicker of firelight, she felt the weight of something far more dangerous. This wasn't a game anymore. The fire crackled in the quiet lounge, shadows dancing across the walls. Elena sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, the weight of Richard's words still heavy in the air. You just might save me. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Not her managers at the diner. Not the strangers who barely tipped. Not even the family she'd worked so hard to support. But before she could reply, the silence was broken by the buzz of Richard's phone on the coffee table. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. A flood of messages from the press. Photos of their dance, their whispers. The look he had given her across the table, it was everywhere already. Elena caught a glimpse of one headline on the glowing screen. Richard Hale's mystery woman, who is she? Her stomach dropped. She stood abruptly. This is out of control. The whole world thinks I'm someone I'm not. Richard rose too, his voice calm. They don't know who you are yet. That's your choice to make. She turned to him, eyes wide. My choice? Richard. I didn't choose this. I was paid $20 to ruin your night. And now my face is on the news next to yours. He studied her, unflinching. Then maybe $20 wasn't enough. Her chest tightened. You don't understand. I can't afford this. Not the attention, not the judgment. People like me don't survive in your world. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then maybe you shouldn't try to survive in my world. Maybe we make our own. Elena's breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but then she remembered the cold glare of his mother. the sharp whispers at the gala, the way Meredith had smirked with her phone. This wasn't just a night of chaos anymore, it was a war she couldn't fight. "I need to go," she whispered, clutching her purse. Richard's brow furrowed. "Go where?" "Home, back to where I belong." He didn't move to stop her, only watched as she walked toward the door. But just as her hand touched the brass handle, his voice cut through the air, low and steady. "Elena." She froze. "You think this was just an accident? That you stumbled into my life, and now it's over?" He shook his head. "I don't believe in accidents. I believe in choices, and I'm choosing you." Her fingers tightened around the handle. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She wanted to turn back, but she couldn't. Not yet. She slipped out into the night, the heavy doors closing behind her with a dull echo. Outside, the cool air rushed against her face. She walked quickly down the steps, away from the glowing mansion, away from the man who spoke like he could rewrite her future. But Richard didn't stay inside. Within moments, the sound of hurried footsteps followed. She turned, startled, to see him striding after her, his expression unreadable. "You're not walking away like this," he said firmly. She shook her head. "You don't get it. You can survive scandals, Richard. You can lose millions and still be fine. But me? I'll lose everything. My job, my brother's respect, whatever little dignity I have left." His gaze softened, the edges of his usual steel melting. "Then let me carry the weight. You don't have to do this alone." The words pierced through her defenses, but fear still clung tight. "And when your board throws me to the wolves? When your mother tears me apart in the press?" Richard stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'll stand with you. Let them come." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, she saw not just a millionaire accustomed to power, but a man willing to risk it. They stood under the night sky, the city lights glowing behind them, the air tense with everything unsaid. Elena's mind spun. She was still the girl who had taken $20 for chaos. Yet somehow, impossibly, she was also the woman this powerful man refused to let go. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't pretending. The night air wrapped around them like a cold warning. Elena stood on the marble steps, Richard only a few feet away. His gaze fixed on her with unshakable resolve. Her heart thudded against her ribs. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to matter. She was supposed to spill a drink, ruin a dinner, and vanish with $20 in her pocket. Instead, she was standing in front of a man who looked at her as though she were the only person in the world. "Richard," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't belong here. Not in your house, not in your car, not in your life." He took another step forward. "And yet you're still here." She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. The truth was, she hadn't run. Not really. Even now, with everything inside her screaming to escape, some part of her stayed rooted to the spot. The rumble of tires broke the silence. Another sleek black car pulled up at the curb, headlights cutting through the night. From it stepped Meredith, flawless as always, her crimson gown flowing like fire in the wind. She looked between them, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Well," she said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy, "isn't this a picture? The mighty Richard Hale chasing after a waitress." Elena stiffened. The word stung more than it should have. Richard, however, didn't flinch. "Meredith, go home." "Oh, well." Meredith's laughter was soft, cruel. "Oh, Richard. You think you can parade her around without consequences? The board called me tonight. They're furious. And your little stunt at the gala? That's already on every news site in the country." Elena's pulse spiked. She turned toward Richard. "See? This is exactly what I meant. You can't risk everything for me." Meredith tilted her head, eyes glittering. "Don't worry, sweetheart. He won't. He never does. Men like Richard don't trade empires for waitresses. You'll be gone by morning." The words cut deep. Elena felt her chest tighten, her breath shaky. She wanted to disappear, to shrink back into the shadows where no one could touch her. But Richard stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying steel. "You're wrong." Meredith blinked. "Excuse me?" "She's not going anywhere," Richard said firmly. "And neither am I." The air shifted, heavier now. Meredith's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," he replied. Elena's throat burned. She couldn't decide if she wanted to cry or scream. Every instinct told her to run from this chaos, but the way he said it, the certainty in his voice, made her knees weaken. Meredith's face hardened. Fine. But when they strip you of your position, don't come crawling back. She turned sharply, heels striking the pavement, and slid back into her car. Within seconds, the vehicle disappeared into the night, leaving only silence behind. Elena finally found her voice. "Why did you say that?" "Because it's the truth," Richard answered. Her chest rose and fell, uneven. "You don't even know me." He studied her for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Maybe not yet, but I know what I see. You don't bow, you don't fake smiles, and you don't run, even when you're terrified. That's more real than anyone I've met in years." The sincerity in his tone cracked something inside her. She looked away quickly, blinking against the sting in her eyes. "I should go home," she whispered. "I'll take you," he said. The drive back was quiet. Elena stared out the window, the city lights blurring past, her thoughts a storm. Every moment with him pulled her deeper into a world she didn't belong in. Yet every time he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. When the car stopped outside her small apartment building, she hesitated. "Don't get out," she said softly. "People will stare." Richard ignored her, stepping out and circling to her side. He opened the door, extending his hand like he had at the gala, like he had on the dance floor. She took it reluctantly, and together they walked up the cracked steps. At her door, she turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. This was supposed to be one night. His gaze was steady. Then let it be the first of many. Her breath caught. She fumbled with her keys, pushing the door open. "Good night, Richard." "Good night, Elena." She slipped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. For a long moment, she leaned against it, her heart racing, her mind reeling. She had ruined his date. She had been nothing more than chaos. And yet, he wasn't letting go. The apartment was quiet after the door shut, but Elena's heart was anything but. She slid down against the wood, her knees pulled to her chest, trying to catch her breath. The hum of the city outside her window felt far away, muffled by the storm in her chest. She had spent her whole life avoiding attention, and now her face was splashed across every gossip site in the city. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring. Inside the Hale Tower, Richard wasn't sleeping either. He sat in his study, the fire burning low, his phone buzzing nonstop with calls he refused to answer. Headlines blinked back at him from the screen. Mystery woman shocks gala. Hale air dances with nobody. Every article tried to tear her down, but instead of anger, Richard felt a rare kind of clarity. For the first time in years, he wasn't bored, wasn't numb. He was alive. Morning came too fast for both of them. Elena rushed through her tiny kitchen, throwing together a simple breakfast for her younger brother, Noah. At just 10 years old, he was sharp-eyed and too observant. "You're all over the news," he said between bites of cereal. Elena froze, the spoon clattering in her hand. "What?" Noah held up his tablet. There she was, blurry but unmistakable, standing in Richard's arms on the dance floor. "Is he your boyfriend?" Her cheeks burned. "Number. It's complicated. You don't look scared in the picture," Noah said quietly. "You look happy." Her throat tightened, but she forced a smile. "Eat your breakfast. You'll be late for school." At the same time across town, Richard strode into the boardroom. His executives sat stiffly, their expressions severe. The chairman cleared his throat. "Richard, last night's display was reckless. You embarrassed this company." Richard dropped into his chair, calm as stone. "What I did was remind everyone that we don't need to play by scripted rules." One of the older board members leaned forward. "Parading around with a waitress? It undermines everything we've built." Richard's gaze darkened. "Everything you've built, perhaps. But I've built my life. And in my life, she stays." The room fell silent. They weren't used to him speaking this way. They weren't used to him defending anyone. Meanwhile, at the diner where Elena worked, reality bit harder. As she tied her apron, whispers spread through the kitchen. A coworker smirked, holding up her phone. "Look who made it to the big leagues, Millionaire's mystery girl." Elena's stomach dropped. Customers stared longer than usual, some even snapping photos. Her cheeks flamed as she carried trays from table to table, her hands clumsy under the weight of their stares. By mid-shift, she slipped outside for air, pressing her palms against the brick wall. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message. "Meet me tonight, I'll be waiting outside the diner. Richard." Her fingers trembled around the screen. She should ignore him. She should shut this down before it destroyed her. But her chest ached with something she couldn't name, something she wasn't ready to let go of. That evening, as the last customers filed out and the neon lights of the diner buzzed in the dark, she spotted him. Richard leaned against a sleek black car, suit crisp, expression unreadable but eyes fixed only on her. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered when she reached him. "And yet," he said softly, "here I am." Her chest rose and fell, uneven. "People are talking. They'll never accept me." "I don't care what they accept," Richard said, his voice low but firm. "What I care about is you." The words struck deep, leaving her breathless. She should have walked away. She should have told him it was impossible. But instead, she felt herself stepping closer, as though drawn by something stronger than reason. In that quiet moment outside the diner, with the hum of the city around them and the world watching from a distance, Elena realized the truth she had been running from. This was no longer just a game of chaos and pretense. Something real had begun. The street outside the diner was quiet, lit only by the flickering neon sign and the soft hum of passing cars. Elena stood frozen in front of Richard, the weight of his words pressing on her chest. "What I care about is you." No one had ever said something like that to her before. She folded her arms, trying to mask the trembling in her hands. "You don't even know me, Richard. You've seen me for 2 nights, maybe 3 hours in total. You can't just decide I matter." He didn't flinch. "I don't need months to see what's in front of me. I know real when I see it." Her laugh came out shaky. "Real? I was paid to ruin your date. That's how this started." Richard's expression hardened, but not with anger. "And you think that matters to me now? If anything, it means you didn't walk into my life with a script. You were yourself from the start." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but the truth was, she hadn't pretended. Even when she tried to, her clumsy mistakes had been all her own. Before she could reply, the sound of voices cut through the night. Across the street, a pair of photographers appeared, cameras raised, lenses glinting in the glow of the diner sign. Elena stiffened. "They're following you." Richard glanced at the flashes, then calmly reached for her hand. "Then let them get their picture." Her heart jumped as his fingers laced with hers, firm and certain. The cameras clicked wildly, each snap echoing like thunder in the quiet night. "Richard," she whispered, panic rising. "This is going to be everywhere by morning." "Thou, good," he said simply. The photographers shouted questions. "Who is she? Is this your girlfriend?" But Richard didn't answer. He only led her toward the car, opening the door as though the chaos didn't exist. Inside, the car felt like another world. The leather seats, the hush of the city outside, the way he still hadn't let go of her hand. Elena stared down at their joined fingers, her chest tight. "This isn't fair," she murmured. "What isn't?" "You," she said softly, "saying things like this, making me feel like I matter. When I know your world will chew me up the second I step into it." His voice was low, steady. "Then, let them try." The conviction in his tone sent a shiver down her spine. She looked away, pressing her forehead against the cool glass of the window, trying to ignore the ache rising in her chest. When the car stopped outside her building, she hesitated. Every part of her wanted to run inside, lock the door, and forget any of this had ever happened. But another part of her, the part that still remembered the way he defended her at the gala, the way he had whispered, "You're not leaving," wanted to stay. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why me, Richard? Out of all the women you could have, why me?" For the first time, his expression softened into something vulnerable. "Because you don't need me. That's why." Her breath caught. No one had ever put it that way. Not when she was always the one struggling, the one people overlooked. She opened the door slowly, stepping out onto the cracked pavement. He didn't follow this time. He only watched her, his eyes steady, even as she walked away. Upstairs, in her small apartment, Elena collapsed onto the couch, her phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. She opened one headline and flinched. A photo of her and Richard, hand in hand outside the diner, plastered across every screen. Millionaire heir chooses waitress over high society. Her stomach turned. Noah would see this. The whole city would see this. Downstairs, Richard's car pulled away from the curb. But his words lingered in her mind like a brand. Because you don't need me, that's why. And for the first time, Elena realized she wasn't just in danger of being ruined by his world. She was in danger of falling in love with him. Morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains of Elena's apartment, painting soft stripes across the worn carpet. She hadn't slept. Her phone buzzed relentlessly through the night, and every headline that flashed across the screen made her chest tighten. Waitress steals Hale heir's heart. Is Richard Hale losing control? Mystery girl or downfall? She brewed coffee on the tiny stove, trying to drown out the noise in her head. Noah padded into the kitchen, hair sticking up, clutching his backpack. He sat down at the table, watching her quietly. "Are you in trouble?" he asked finally. Her hand froze on the coffee pot. "Why would you ask that?" He slid his tablet across the table. Another article, another photo. Her hand in Richard's outside the diner, his eyes on her like she was the only person in the world. "You look happy in these," Noah said softly. "But people at school are already talking. They say you're going to ruin him." Her throat closed. She knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. "Listen to me. Whatever they say, don't believe it. You hear me?" He nodded slowly, but his eyes were uncertain. Across the city, Richard faced a different storm. The boardroom buzzed with voices, investors slamming reports on the table. His mother sat at the head, her expression cold and unyielding. "This ends now," she snapped. "You've dragged our name through the mud, dancing with a waitress, holding her hand outside a diner. Do you even realize what you've done?" Richard leaned back in his chair, unshaken. "Yes, I reminded people that I make my own choices." One of the executives glared. "Your choices cost us. Stock dropped 2 points overnight. Our partners are calling for explanations." "Then tell them the truth," Richard said. "Tell them I don't build an empire by pretending. Tell them I stand with the people who are real." His mother's eyes blazed. "This girl is a distraction. She will destroy you." He didn't look away. She's the only thing keeping me from destroying myself." The room fell silent. No one dared to speak after that. Meanwhile, Elena was pulling double shifts at the diner, trying to hide from the chaos. Customers stared more than usual. Some smiled kindly, others sneered. A group of wealthy-looking women at the corner booth whispered loud enough for her to hear. "She thinks she's special. Wait until he drops her. Men like him always do." Elena gripped the tray tighter, her palms sweating. She wanted to shout back, but instead, she forced herself to deliver the plates and walk away. She couldn't fight every battle. When her shift finally ended, she stepped outside into the cool evening air, exhausted. Richard's car was waiting at the curb. He stood beside it, his suit sharp even after a long day, his eyes searching for hers. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "And yet here I am," he replied. Her chest tightened. "You're making this worse for yourself, for me, for everyone." He shook his head. "I don't care what they say, Elena. I care about what's true." She hugged her apron to her chest, torn between fear and something deeper. "And what if the truth is that I can't survive in your world?" Richard stepped closer, his voice steady, almost tender. "Then I'll bring my world to yours." Her breath caught. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He meant it. But before she could answer, a sudden flash of light blinded her. Reporters spilled from parked cars, cameras raised, microphones shoved toward her face. "Elena, how long have you been seeing Richard Hale? Are you moving in with him? Do you think you're ruining his company?" Panic clawed at her chest. She backed up against the wall, her heart racing. Richard moved instantly, shielding her with his body. "That's enough," he barked. "Back off." The flashes didn't stop. The questions grew louder. Elena pressed her hands over her face, wishing she could disappear. Richard grabbed her hand firmly. "Stay with me." And in that moment, as the world tried to tear her apart, she realized he wasn't letting go. Not tonight. Not ever. The mob of reporters didn't stop. The sidewalk outside the diner turned into a storm of flashes and shouts. Elena clung to Richard's hand, her breath coming fast, her vision narrowing. She had never been hunted like this, never been cornered by strangers who wanted every piece of her. Richard pulled her close, his body a shield. "Enough," he barked, his voice slicing through the chaos. but the cameras kept flashing, hungry for every frame. One reporter pushed forward, shoving a microphone almost into Elena's face. "Miss, how does a waitress trap a millionaire? Was this all a plan?" The words hit her like a slap. Her knees went weak. She remembered the crumpled $20 bill, the careless deal that had started everything. And now the whole world thought she was nothing more than a gold digger. Her voice cracked. "Richard, please. I can't." He turned instantly, eyes locking on hers, steady and fierce. "You're not alone. Breathe. Just breathe." He signaled to his driver. The black car rolled up, cutting through the crowd. Richard opened the door and practically lifted Elena inside. He followed, slamming the door shut, shutting out the storm of voices. Inside, silence hit hard. Elena pressed her shaking hands to her face, trying to steady herself. "They think I'm using you," she whispered. "They think I planned this. And the truth is, I did take the money, Richard. I did. I never told you that night. I was paid $20 to ruin your date." Her confession hung heavy in the air. Richard sat still, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. For a moment she couldn't breathe, terrified of what he would say. Then his voice came low and steady. "I already knew." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I knew the moment you spilled that water. It wasn't clumsiness. It was too deliberate. But then you sat down, and you didn't flinch. You weren't there for them. You were there for you. And I realized whoever paid you $20 underestimated you." Tears burned at her eyes. "But it doesn't matter. The world will never believe that. They'll only believe the worst." Richard leaned forward, his voice softer now. "Then let them believe what they want. The truth is ours." Her heart twisted. She wanted to believe him, but the panic from the crowd still clung to her skin. She leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes, trying to steady the storm inside. The car pulled up to her building. Richard didn't move to get out. He only looked at her. "Do you want me to come up?" She shook her head quickly. "It's safer if you don't. My neighbors already stare." For once, he didn't argue. He simply reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "Then promise me one thing. Don't let them decide who you are." Her throat tightened. She couldn't promise that, but she nodded anyway, because his eyes begged her to. She slipped out of the car, the night air cool against her flushed face. Upstairs, in the tiny apartment, Noah was waiting. His eyes widened when he saw her. They were outside, weren't they? She nodded, sinking onto the couch. "It's worse than I thought." Noah sat beside her, silent for a while. Then he whispered, "Do you like him?" Her chest ached. "That's not the point." "It is to me," Noah said simply. She looked at her little brother, too young to understand the weight of power and money, but old enough to see the truth in her face. And for the first time, she admitted it to herself. Yes. She liked him. Maybe more than she should. Across the city, Richard sat alone in his car, long after the driver parked at the estate. The phone on the seat beside him buzzed with messages from his mother. From the board. From people who wanted him to cut ties immediately. But he ignored them all. He stared at the empty space where Elena had sat, her scent still lingering faintly in the leather, and he knew the truth. This wasn't about rebellion anymore. It was about love, dangerous, fragile, and real. The next morning arrived with no mercy. Elena walked to the diner with her head down, hood pulled tight, but whispers followed her like shadows. Customers pointed. Strangers snapped photos from across the street. She could feel the weight of judgment before she even reached the door. Inside, the kitchen was already buzzing. Her manager glanced at her with narrowed eyes. "Elena, we need to talk." Her stomach dropped. She followed him into the back office, the smell of grease and coffee clinging to the walls. He didn't bother softening the blow. "Business is booming because of you, but not in a good way. People aren't coming here for food. They're coming to gawk. We can't run a diner with reporters out front." Her voice cracked. "So you're firing me?" His expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. "I don't have a choice." She left the office with her apron bundled in her hands, humiliation burning in her chest. This job had been her lifeline, her only steady income, the roof over her and Noah's heads. And now it was gone, not because of her mistakes, but because of Richard Hale. By noon, she was back at the apartment, staring at the bills stacked on the counter. Noah peeked around the corner, worry written all over his young face. "You lost your job, didn't you?" She tried to smile but failed. "I'll figure something out." But before she could sink deeper into despair, a knock echoed at the door. She opened it to find Richard standing there, suit crisp, expression firm. "You should have called me," he said quietly. She stepped aside, letting him in, anger and relief colliding inside her chest. "What was I supposed to say? That I lost everything because of you?" He didn't flinch. "Then let me fix it." Her laugh was bitter. "You can't buy back my dignity, Richard. You can't just throw money at every problem." He stepped closer, his eyes steady. "I'm not offering money. I'm offering myself. Whatever storm comes, I'll stand in it with you." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the strength in his voice. But then she saw Noah watching from the doorway, small and uncertain, and the weight of reality crushed her again. "Richard," she whispered, "this isn't just about me. It's about him. He deserves stability, not scandals." "All?" For the first time, Richard's gaze flicked toward Noah. Something in his face softened, something human beneath all the armor. He knelt slightly, meeting the boy's wary eyes. "You like basketball?" he asked. Noah hesitated, then nodded. Richard smiled faintly. "So did I, when I was your age. Maybe we can shoot hoops sometime." The boy's eyes widened with cautious surprise, and Elena's chest tightened. She had never seen Richard like this, gentle, reaching out instead of commanding. When he stood again, his voice was quiet but resolute. "I'm not walking away, Elena. Not from you. Not from him. If you'll let me, I'll prove it." She couldn't speak. Her world had collapsed in a single morning, yet somehow, standing in the ruins, Richard Hale was offering something she had never been given before. A chance not just to survive but to be chosen. The days that followed felt like a blur of firestorms. Elena's photo was on every news site, every gossip blog, every television screen at the diner she no longer worked in. Headlines screamed about the waitress who trapped a millionaire. Strangers online tore apart her clothes, her background, her very existence. She tried to shut it all out, keeping the curtains drawn, but the whispers seeped in through cracks she couldn't close. Noah stayed close, watching her with worried eyes, as if afraid she might shatter. Then Richard appeared again, this time not at her door, but on every screen in the city. At a press conference, surrounded by reporters and cameras, he stood tall in his charcoal suit, his voice steady and deliberate. "You want to know who she is?" he said, his gaze direct. "Her name is Elena. She's strong. She's brave. And she's real. And if you think I'll turn my back on her because of gossip, then you don't know me at all." The room erupted with questions, flashes exploding. But he didn't waver. Back in her apartment, Elena sat frozen, staring at the screen. Noah nudged her gently. "He said your name." Her chest tightened, tears threatening. Richard had just put everything on the line, his company, his reputation for her. That evening, he showed up at her door once more. When she opened it, she couldn't find the words. "You saw it?" he asked. She nodded. "I won't apologize for it," he continued. "I'm not ashamed of you, Elena. And I never will be." Her voice shook. "Do you have any idea what you just risked?" "Yes," he said simply. "But for once, the risk is worth it." The room was silent, except for Noah's soft footsteps as he padded over. The boy looked between them, then up at Richard. "You meant it? What you said on television?" Richard crouched, meeting his eyes. Every word. Something in Noah's guarded expression cracked. For the first time, he offered Richard a small smile. Elena's throat burned. She had spent so long believing she was disposable, replaceable, a shadow in other people's lives. And now here was a man who stood in front of the world and chose her. But she also knew storms don't end in a single night. The backlash would keep coming. People would fight harder to tear them apart. She whispered, "This doesn't make it easier." Richard reached for her hand, steady and certain. "Number, but it makes us stronger." "Oh." And for the first time since this whirlwind began, Elena let herself believe it might be true. Weeks passed, and the noise that once felt deafening began to fade. The headlines slowed, the cameras turned their lenses elsewhere, and what remained was quieter but truer. Elena still carried whispers on her back whenever she stepped outside, but she no longer lowered her head. Not after what Richard had done. One Saturday morning, sunlight spilled into her small apartment as she set out breakfast. Pancakes, syrup, scrambled eggs, simple. But more than she and Noah usually had. Richard sat at the table, sleeves rolled up, pouring orange juice into mismatched cups. The sight was almost surreal. The man who once dined under chandeliers now laughing with her little brother in a kitchen the size of his closet. Noah grinned, showing off a new basketball Richard had brought him. He promised to teach me how to play this afternoon. Elena shook her head, half smiling. Richard Hale. Teaching basketball on a cracked neighborhood court. Never thought I'd see the day. He met her gaze across the table, eyes steady. I told you, Elena. I'm not ashamed of where you come from. I'd rather meet you here than in any ballroom. Her throat tightened. She remembered the night she'd first walked into that glittering restaurant, armed with nothing but a $20 bill and nerves. She'd been so sure she didn't belong. Yet now, sitting across from him, watching Noah beam, she realized belonging had nothing to do with money or marble floors. It was about being seen, and Richard had seen her from the start. Later that day, the three of them walked down to the local court. The pavement was cracked, the nets frayed, but Noah dribbled happily, his laughter echoing. Richard showed him how to pivot, how to line up a shot, his patience disarming in a way Elena had never witnessed before. She sat on the bench, watching them, her heart full. For once, there were no reporters, no flashing cameras, just a boy learning the game, a man teaching with quiet care, and a woman realizing that love could be simple. When the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, Richard sat beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. Noah ran off to chase the ball again. Richard's voice was soft. You know, if someone had told me a month ago that a waitress would change everything I believed about life, I would have laughed. Elena looked at him, her eyes glistening. And if someone had told me a millionaire would fight the world just to stand beside me, I would have thought they were crazy. Oh, he reached for her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. Crazy or not, here we are. She smiled through the sting of tears. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future. Not of the whispers, not of the judgment, not of the storm still waiting, because she wasn't facing it alone. As Noah shot the ball and shouted with joy, Elena leaned against Richard's shoulder. The girl who had been paid $20 to ruin a blind date had found something worth more than any fortune. She had found love unexpected, imperfect, but undeniably real. And this time, no headline could take it away.